What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another collection update for you. And once again, this is all stuff that I got in Florida. And we are only in like the D's and E's and some F's, maybe a G or two. We still have a long way to go because I bought a lot of stuff. Yeah, I decided to alphabetize this just because it was a little bit easier to kind of like cycle in everything. But yeah, bunch of stuff to go over here, and we are just going to get right down to it. Dio, Lock Up the Wolves. This is the 5th album from this heavy metal legend. I've been, again, like patching up the holes in my collection in terms of certain artists, and I'm missing still at least a few more Dio ones, mostly just like the later ones, but I saw this one. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about it and snagged it, and this is a really solid album. A little different than I was expecting. I was expecting more like, classic heavy metal anthems, which there definitely are some. I mean, the opening track, Wild One, is an absolute heavy metal ripper. But the whole vibe of this album, I don't know, there's like a sultry swagger to certain songs on here. Between Two Hearts, Evil on Queen Street, there's, I don't know, again, like more of like a bluesy edge to it. You hear Dio crooning a little bit more. He sounds incredible on this album, but I mean, he sounds incredible on like every album, honestly. This is definitely a more mid-tempo to kind of slow album too, and it's pretty long. In fact, I want to say it's almost an hour long, but it has like, again, like kind of a different vibe. Like it's not like bombastic and super energetic. It's more moody and sort of dark. And looking into this one, I thought it was interesting that this is the only album with Rowan Robertson on guitars, which I believe he stepped in after Dream Evil, and this kid was only 18 years old, and he is doing a lot of amazing riff work on here. His solos are great, super young talent on here, and I was like, man, why didn't they keep this dude? Well, this came right before the whole reunion with Black Sabbath when they did Dehumanizer, so everything Dio related kind of got pushed to the side, and they went and did the Dehumanizer thing. That obviously didn't last very long. And when Dio got back to doing his solo project, he had already pretty much recruited mostly a new band, or at least a new guitarist in that case, and kind of left this kid waiting in the wings, which kind of sucks. I mean, he did an excellent job in here. Like, I love all the lead work in here, and I think the songs are really well composed, especially the title track. I really like that whole broken down riff and synth pattern on there. The bridge on it is particularly doomy and haunting. Like, I think this is a really solid album. The only thing I can really knock it on is it is a little bit long, but overall I think the songs are really solid in here. And, I didn't know the story behind it, but I thought the story was kind of fascinating. I mean, albeit, at least if you're Rowan Robertson, it didn't necessarily have a happy ending when it came down to being in Dio, but still, it was interesting to read up on this. But yeah, if you have never checked out this Dio album, this is a pretty solid one. And yeah, I definitely plan on getting more in the future. False Gods, no Symmetry, only Disillusion. This is the debut album from this Long Island-based doom/sludge act. A blind buy here. There are definitely plenty of blind buys in here. I got this because it was modestly priced. I looked up, what style it was. I'm always down for some more doom and sludge. And this actually turned out to be pretty good. This band sounds a lot like Black Tusk. Like Black Tusk and pretty much High on Fire. Big, sludgy, droning riffs, very thick, very just kind of dirty sounding guitar tone. The production, more of a kind of an analog sound, but there's a lot of like sizzle and kind of grit to the overall like, kind of sound of it. While it definitely has like its faster, more aggressive moments like Enemy Territory and I Know Too Much. I Know Too Much actually features like tremolos and blast beats. Like it almost gets, almost kind of like blackened sludge a bit there. There's a lot of like lush, just kind of like post-metal vibes that pop up in here. Like there's stuff I could definitely compare to like early Neurosis as well. Stay Frosty and All That's Left Behind definitely have like a more like kind of slow lumbering sludge sort of vibe to them, but they kind of open up into these, I guess, like musical pastures of like more like ambient droning melodies and something again that kind of gives it more of that post-metal vibe to kind of like give you like a minute or two before it just beats you over the head again. Stay Frosty in particular kind of like does both. Like it's kind of got like more deep beats. It's got kind of a dissonant sort of like crust vibe to it. And then it has these giant doomy sections. So you get a little bit of both on there. The only thing I didn't like on here was Call the Neanderthal, which is just an ambient droning sort of transitional track. And I'd be fine if it was like, maybe a minute or so just to kind of segue into the next track. I mean, I'd probably still skip it anyway. but it went on for entirely too long, and it's more or less just sort of a noise piece. There's a lot of cool dynamics in the songs themselves, but having like a piece like that kind of smack dab in the middle of the album, it kind of like put the brakes on everything for a while, and it just was pretty much like a wall of feedback and drone, and you know, that's just kind of filler to me. But overall, I really dug this. This, again, Blind By, and I found a new band I definitely want to check out more by. This, again, was their first album, came out 4 years ago, so I can't remember if they have any more albums, but I definitely want to look into them. Yeah, if you're a big fan, again, of Black Tusk, Neurosis, Cult of Luna, and definitely some High on Fire, too, definitely check this out. Pretty solid release. All right, we have a pair here from Engulfed. We have their second EP, Vengeance of the Fallen, and we have their second full-length, Unearthly Litanies of Despair. Now, these are ones I actually ordered from Dark Descent, and they just showed up, you know, by the time I got home, so there's a couple of those still mixed in here, I believe. And this is a band I've been hearing a lot about. Turkish death metal, which I know that scene is very incestuous. And I mean, in fact, I know that members of this band are also in like Hyperdontia, Diabolizer, Burial Invocation, you know, bands like that, probably Decaying Purity too, I think. That whole scene in Turkey, they just swap members, change logos, and it's a whole new band. And I really don't have any problems with it because a lot of the stuff that they come up with there is just fantastic old school death metal, and I ended up digging both of these. Starting with Vengeance of the Fallen, this is very much in line with just kind of cavernous old school death metal, very gritty and dark, lots of dissonant melodies. The opening track on here, Rites of Abandoned Heretics, it's a big 8-minute opener, and it's just absolutely mammoth size. And speaking of Cruciamentum, this is a Dan Lowndes mix, so it sounds just very haunting and dark, and I mean, a lot like Cruciamentum. The vocals are deep and gravelly, almost sort of gasped at times. There's tons of atmosphere in here. Lots of just sinister tremolo hooks, especially Summoning the Black Death. That song is just tremolo hook after tremolo hook. It's a nasty EP, but honestly, when I heard this, because I listened to them back to back, this one is even more menacing, bigger sounding. This is a different producer in here whose name I did not write down, probably should have, but the mix in here might be even better. And I love Dan Lowndes' production overall, but here it's just, I don't know, larger sounding. The drums pop more, the guitars have a way thicker sound overall. I would say this does pretty much everything that this one does, except it just does it better, and it's just, again, bigger. There's like more to it. Echoes of Suffering in particular has some almost Gojira-like crawls to it. It's very groovy. It's kind of built on some nasty chugs and some, again, like very interesting riffs that just kind of scream Gojira. And of course, with death metal that wants to be sinister and cavernous and dark, you have to have some Morbid Angel tremolos. And believe me, they show up on Infernal Desolation and Cursed Eternity. Giant hooks on there, lots of dissonant atmosphere as well. And in this mix, the drums actually stand out a little bit more. You can hear all the intricacies and just how rapid fire the drummer is going. Like every song in here gets pretty damn blasty, but there's a lot of creative accents, turnovers. There's a lot of just cool dynamics overall in their sound. And there's even some like more clean passages to break up the wall-to-wall just bludgeoning of riffs on here that kind of adds a little bit more of a haunting, foreboding atmosphere. Both of these are awesome, and I've seen a lot of people talk about Engulfed. I've been meaning to check them out for a while. Well, yeah, more death metal that has come out recently that is absolutely awesome, and this is a 2024 release, which means, yeah, more awesome death metal in 2024, and that's always problematic because I already have a lot of death metal that's possibly going to make my year-end list. But yeah, if you have not checked out this band and you're a big fan of, well, a lot of the bands that they also are in, like Burial Invocation, Hyperdontia, Diabolizer, but also like Incantation, Cruciamentum, Morbid Angel, stuff like that, check out both of these releases because they're both awesome. All right, we got another pair here, this time from Evergrey, because after I reviewed that last Evergrey, I decided I need to actually get some more in my collection. So we have their 12th album here, Escape of the Phoenix, and then we have their 13th album, The Heartless Portrait, The Orphean Testament. And both of these came out within 1 year of one another. So like I said, we went over the last album, Theories of Emptiness. I ended up really enjoying it and kind of realizing that I've been skipping out on a pretty solid, power prog band, I guess you could call it. Swedish band, they've been turning out albums for years. I've just kind of overlooked them or confused them with other bands. And I wanted to check out more. And honestly, both of these kind of run similar to the one I went over. Deep down tune guitars, huge vocal hooks. It's more about like the songwriting and the hooks than it is about like very like lavish technical songwriting. Like a lot of these songs feel very straightforward. Like they definitely have their syncopated breakdowns and like more off time moments and some, more lavish transitions and layers. But at the same time, everything is very built around like big hooks, soaring vocals, especially on the choruses. I really enjoy the vocals. They don't go too far into power metal territory where it's a lot of like high pitched wailing that starts to get on my nerves. And when it comes down to like subject matter, it's a little bit less power metal, like more, personal, I would say. There's tons of big, heavy riffs all over the place, like the opening track on here, Forever Outsider, a Dandelion Cypher, I think is a really solid one as well. You have your softer, more ballady tracks, which are very powerful and evocative, and you have like your straight up rockers that seem like they were destined to be singles. And I really enjoyed this one and this one, but here's the thing. Both of these came out within a year of one another, and they both sound the same. Like, down to the pacing, down to the production, down to pretty much everything. And I listened to them in order, and I really enjoyed this one. Like, it, again, just kind of does everything that, at least so far from what I've heard from this band, they do well. But then listening to this one right afterwards, which both of them are, close to the 50-minute mark, I think one of them might be a little bit over, I felt like I was listening to this album again. Like, when it comes down to comparing these two, there's really nothing that kind of stands apart. Like, even down to the production, it sounds the same, which it's the same producer, it's probably the same studio, and they did it really kind of like close to one another in terms of like, they probably wrote a lot of these songs at the same time, I would guess. That's not to say that, this album doesn't have its own merits. Like, I do like the song Ominous in particular. I do think that the synths might stand out a little bit more on here versus this one. They feel a little bit more in the back. They feel a little bit more out front in here, and I kind of like them sitting in the back, sort of just accenting the music as a seasoning rather than being something that is way out front and, trying to partake maybe a little bit too much. I think the longer songs in here are particularly really good. I also think they're good in here. My issue here is, while I like them both, I just feel like they're too similar. And again, I feel like they were kind of written around the same time because they definitely have that vibe. Like, yeah, the big rockers on here have the same vibe as the big rockers on here. The heavier songs, same thing. Even the more ballady songs, I don't know, the ballady songs are a little bit better in here. Wildfires in particular, I just thought was like a kind of a lackluster closer. But either way, I still liked them both. They're still enjoyable albums. They're still full of just giant rock hooks and great vocal lines and, really solid riffs and clever songwriting. It's just, they definitely have a sound, apparently, or at least in this era of the band, they definitely have a sound. I still need to kind of go back and check out more of their earlier stuff. But yeah, if you like bands like, I guess like Devin Townsend's kind of comparable, maybe Soilwork too, check them both out. Both pretty solid albums. They just sound a little too alike. Fecalith War has begun. This is the third EP from this Tampa-based, well, all right, it was listed as melodic death metal when I looked at the archives. I think they were off because I would say this is more along the lines of brutal death metal with like a little bit of melody too on it, because it's just blasty and vicious across the board. Now, interestingly enough, this band features Nocturnist AD keyboardist Josh Holdren on drums, and apparently he is a blast beat machine. And again, with that mellow death comparison, at least on the archives, I had myself kind of set up in terms of like what I expected on here as being something more akin to like, like At the Gates or like Dark Tranquility or something like that. Something that just registers in my head as Melodeath, and hearing flat out Deicide and like Vital Remains riffs come right out of the gate along with blast beats. And I would say like more like high to mid vocals when there was still some deep roars in here, but everything on here screamed more death metal. And even the melodies on here, not like something that is like completely removed from like old school death metal in general. Now it does have like some groovier moments on here, like Tomb of the Hides actually starts off a little bit slower. Same thing in the Arms of, Don't I? Maybe that's what that is. Anyway, there's a little bit more groove in there to kind of like slope the very blasty pace, and that gets like super blasted. Like there's like gravity blasts on here. But having that pace broken up was kind of nice. And all right, mix-wise, it is kind of muddy, a little bit rough. I do think the guitars could come up because I feel like the vocals and the drums kind of like wash them out a little bit. Like they just don't have like the big enough presence as far as a big beefy tone to kind of drive home these riffs. And the riffs in here I think are pretty solid. Again, like more along the lines of like, I mean, honestly, like Floridian death metal, which I don't know, that should have been what I expected. But again, you know, archives are a little misleading there. Overall, it's short, it's vicious, it's got some pretty savage riffs and some just insane drum work on it. And I ended up digging it. It's more along the lines of just like kind of straight up old school death metal. Maybe some like slightly more like blackened death metal vibes like Angel Corpse. Either way, check them out. They're pretty solid. I think they only have EPs, like there's no full lengths in their discography, but still that gives you something to check out. So yeah, do it. Frightener Guillotine. This is the debut and only full length from this UK hardcore / crust / grindcore act. I, again, picked this one up as a blind buy. I saw that it was listed as grindcore / hardcore or crust or whatever. And I believe it was instantly compared to Disrupt, and it was like, you know what, that's enough for me. And honestly, this is fantastic. I dig the hell out of it. This is nothing but D beats, gritty, just dirty, kind of punky riffs. There's definitely still some metallic moments and stuff that leans a little bit more towards like Napalm Death in here, but a lot of this sounds like Disrupt. And I love Disrupt, so this is kind of an easy sell for me. The songs are short, vicious. I think you only have one track on here over 3 minutes. Lots of like hardcore bellows and screams and sort of a mid-range delivery. And again, like there are some more metallic moments on here, but the thing I like is how they alternate between like, you know, just flat out like down-picked, crusty riffs to something more metallic, like some thrashy chugs or like some like death metal tremolos. It all kind of gets woven into the sound really well, and momentum is key on here because this album keeps its foot on the gas the entire time. I think the title track in here might be the slowest moment on here. It's a little bit sludgier and slower, but eventually it just picks up the pace again. And then you even have like some more like crossover thrash songs like Black Rain and Violent Graves that just kind of like lay on stuff that you would associate with bands like Enforced, Municipal Waste, albeit this version of Municipal Waste doesn't want to party, it just wants to destroy stuff because it's angry at, I would say, like the government more than likely. I don't know enough about the UK's government circa 2006 to really say otherwise. I just know that politics are pretty crazy right now, kind of regardless, and I'm pretty sure they were crazy back in 2006. Every year is crazy. Anyway, this is absolutely vicious, a great blind buy here. If you are a big fan of Disrupt, Napalm Death, I would say like Nails too. Check this out. This is an absolutely vicious album from start to finish. And yeah, I don't know, we might have to do like a full-on retro review for this one day. Maybe. I don't know how much draw there is for this one, but I'm still encouraging you guys to check it out because I thought it was absolutely killer. Frightmare, Midnight Murder Mania. This is the debut full-length from this Oregon-based death grind / death thrash act. Features current and former members of bands like Lord Gore, Blood Freak, and, well, I mean, namely that one key member is Neil Smith, who is now formerly of Dripping Decay, which sucks because that band essentially dissolved. And I think Neil was kind of a main focus as to why that band dissolved, but whatever. We have a different project here, and this is, I mean, kind of in the vein of like Impaled and Exhumed. You got thrashy riffs, it's got grindy blast beat sections, lots of horror movie samples, and some pretty well-known ones like, let's see, Thorn in Their Side, The Slumber Party Massacre, Friday the 13th, Black Christmas. I think that movie is absolutely amazing, not the remake, the original. Very fast-paced, lots of riff changes, alternating between like, you know, grindy sections to thrash metal riffs. Actually pretty damn catchy. The vocals are very layered and you get a lot of different vocal styles. Like this kind of has that Carcass effect where they're switching between, you know, high-pitched shrieks and the like low guttural roars. Albeit some of these vocal switches feel like deliberately camped up a bit. Kind of like Ghoul a bit. Lots of punky sections on here too. The title track, Thorn in Their Side, The Slumber Party Massacre, definitely has like a lot of like punk spirit to it. Some really good thrashy moments on Slasher Holocaust. All these songs kind of like run the gamut really well in terms of like switching up styles and like different dynamics. There's a fair amount of melody, especially on Be My Bloody Valentine. Like, it's got some good melodic hooks that I really wasn't expecting. And as far as the samples go, I think probably the best one on here is Friday the 13th. Not only because I know that franchise pretty damn well, but it's the whole, like, voice repeating, "Killer, mommy, killer." And I don't know, it just brings me back to, like, sitting in my mom's basement watching horror movies and, just eating fucking popcorn and maybe sneaking beers in the house. But yeah, this is a pretty fun album. I think they have at least one other one. There might be two other ones, but I do want to check those out as well. But yeah, I mean, if you're a big fan of Exhumed, Impaled, Carcass, I don't know, mostly Exhumed and Impaled. Like, if you like those two bands and Ghoul, I think you'll probably like this one. It's just fun, goofy, silly, over the top, and just ridiculously gory, and I like all those things. So yeah, check it out. Gory Blister. Art bleeds, and so do blisters occasionally. Anyway, this is the first album from this Italian technical / brutal death metal act. Another blind buy. It was reasonably priced. I figured, why not? It had an interesting name, and what I expected was just some flat out gory, blasty, disgusting shit. I mean, it kind of alludes to that with the cover, the name. I mean, with a band name like Gory Blister, you have certain expectations, and well, none of my expectations were met, but that's still fine because this is really awesome, like, more like technical death metal. In fact, there's a lot of stuff in here that has later death vibes on it. Like, someone did a more brutal and blast beat oriented version of Sounds of Perseverance. Well, the opening track definitely, like, kind of comes out with just, like, some absolutely vicious tremolos and almost kind of like deicide like energy. As the album goes on, you start hearing more melody, more progressive flair to it. Like, there's definitely stuff in here that reminds me of Atheist too. The album seems to really, like, open up as it keeps going. You start getting more, like, off-time drum patterns and, like, crazy riff transitions and some really solid thrashy riffs, especially on As Blood Moves and A Gout from the Scar. Even the song titles imply that this is going to be, like, some gory, brutal death metal, like, Gorgasm or something, but that was 100% not the case. The production here, I think, is really solid too. Like, it's organic and, kind of clean sounding. Like, there's no pingy snare or anything. This just sounds like really solid, natural drums, and the drum performance in here is fantastic. And there's even some, like, clean sections that have, like, almost like jazz fusion, like, cynic-like guitars on Cognitive Synergy, and the last track, Comet, and her trail of spiritual dust, which I suppose those definitely sound a little bit more like prog death or tech death songs, because the rest of this is just, like, not setting you up for, like, what you would assume a band like Gory Blister would sound like. Now, this is surprisingly short at 33 minutes, but honestly it feels like a full listen. I guess there's a version out there with a bonus track, which is a Depeche Mode cover. They covered Never Let Me Down, and honestly, after listening to this, I'm kind of curious what they all did to that. Now, this did have some negatives, namely the two interludes on here, Mermaid's Beloved and Snowfall, which features operatic female vocals, which was like, okay, well, I saw that listed and was like, all right, that should be interesting. And as I was listening to the album, I was like, all right, this should be kind of clever as to how they interject them. And, well, I don't think they record them very well, because it sounds like this lady is singing inside of a porta potty. It's just very, like, echoey and, I don't know, like, compressed, but in, like, a way where, like, the room she's singing in is very small, but it has, like, a slight echo. It sounds like she's singing in a bathroom. And because of that, it doesn't give it that full gravitas. The operatic vocals are probably supposed to have, like, the impact is very much dulled there. Outside of that, though, I really dug this. And again, was really expecting something that was just, like, flat out more brutal, but this is not necessarily, like, tech death to the point where it's just, again, like, wankery. Like, this is clever riff writing, a lot of thrash influence. Like, again, if you're a big fan of, like, Atheist, Later Death, Sounds of Perseverance especially, like, I heard a lot of that stuff on here, but again, like, a little bit more blasty and heavy. Check this out. This is a really solid album. I definitely want to check out more by this band for sure. And yeah, I'm kind of curious what the rest of their albums sound like if there was, like, an earlier album that warranted the name Gory Blister, and then they just kind of changed styles. I don't know, I guess we'll find out when I jam more of their stuff. Graveyard 6. This is their 6th album, because I suppose calling it 6 without it being their 6th album would be kind of silly. Anyway, I've been a fan of this band since their debut, and somehow I missed this one last year. This is Swedish retro rock, like very much in the vein of like classic rock acts like, you know, Cream, Led Zeppelin, maybe even like a little bit of Pink Floyd too. This band, I would say, loves nothing modern. I actually saw them open up for Opeth years ago. Actually, it was right before the pandemic hit. And they put on an absolutely awesome show. And yeah, I'm usually kind of like on it whenever they drop a new album, but somehow I missed this one. And honestly, this one is a little bit different, and I don't know if I like it as much. Well, it's got its good rockers on it, like Twice and Just a Drop, which is a fantastic song, loaded with like just some flat out killer riffs. Like it gets a little bit Sabbathy on that song. A lot of this album is very laid back. Now, they've done tons of like more laid back, chill songs in the past, but they usually broke it up well to the point where like it was kind of a give and take with like the more up-tempo, more raucous songs to the more, you know, laid back or more introspective, more ballady songs, I guess you could say. But this one stays more firmly planted in the chill zone. Like this is more relaxing, more moody, like Breathe In, Breathe Out, which is weird because I'm pretty sure that was the name of one of the songs on Greenleaf's last album, but that's a little bit more along the lines of what I wanted from this band. Anyway, good female backup vocals, you know, kind of reminds me of like Pink Floyd, like, you know, Dark Side of the Moon, stuff like that. Wish You Were Here. More mellow, but still kind of like dark sounding. It's more driven by the vocals than it is, say, like the guitars or really the instrumentation. Like everything's kind of a more slow, labored groove. I Follow You is a little bit, you know, kind of outside of this more chill realm. It has kind of an acid rock bridge on it where it really just kind of goes like full bore, spacey, Hawkwind kind of vibes on the bridge. But a lot of this, like, after those songs that really stand out, it just kind of goes back to this more melancholic, mellow, kind of bluesy jam. And while I really like that, again, it's that give and take between, like, you know, the more raucous songs, the more experimental songs, and the more moody songs. It makes the songs stand apart more, and honestly, after Just a Drop, like, it really kind of loses a lot of steam towards the end. And I'll be honest, it didn't build up that much steam to begin with. I still think it's good. Like, it's just a very chill, kind of laid-back listen. And again, I've been used to them kind of balancing out things throughout all their albums. That this one just kind of, I don't know, it just feels like, you know, listless. It's kind of lacking energy. But at the same time, I don't think the songs are necessarily bad. It's just, you know, kind of not for me. But yeah, I'd still say check it out, form your own opinions. Like, again, if you're a big fan of like Rival Sons, Greenleaf, again, like classic rock bands like Cream especially, check this out. Pretty decent, but again, not exactly what I was looking for. Greenwitch, Cosmossteelblood Trinity. This is the second EP from this California-based death metal act. I heard some rumblings in the underground about this band. I think I saw them in Maggot Stomp's distro or their Bandcamp page a while ago, but they didn't have any physical media. This one came out on Horror Pain Gore Death Productions. I saw it. It was modestly priced. I was like, yeah, let's check this out. And this is just some festering, rotten, old school death metal with absolutely grimy riffs, huge drums, gurgled vocals. But despite it being just absolutely disgusting sounding, it is very catchy, kind of in the realm of like Autopsy, but you don't get a lot of the punky breaks. It's more groove laden, and I don't know, like I wouldn't say it's like Death Doom, but it kind of hangs on to like just a very groovy style overall. But either way, it's the riffs. The riffs in here are catchier than hell. Parasitic Possession and To Devour the Flesh of Worlds, driven by just like a good solid hook. And there's some good variety to the riffs. Like it's not just your standard death metal riffs all the time. From the Nothing and Celestial Tomb in particular have like more hardcore driven breakdowns. They have like those squawky alarm clock riffs to them that, you know, you'd hear in like Botch and Converge and stuff like that, albeit with like a big hefty death metal kind of groove to them. And of course the guitar tone is just fucking rotten and thick as hell on here. There's a good two-step and tremolo break on To Devour the Flesh of Worlds too. What little lead work there is on here is very just abrasive and squawky. Like this whole album has just a gross texture that is somehow both slimy and coarse. It's like blowing your nose in sandpaper. Which without the context of me describing this album sounds totally horrible because you're definitely going to take chunks of nose meat with every wipe. But this is absolutely awesome. I dig this EP. It is just gross, filthy, old school death metal. Tons of groove, tons of riffs. It's kind of meat and potatoes, but it's got a good kind of like just gross atmosphere to it that kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. If you're a big fan of Sanguisugabog, I would say, you know, maybe like Creeping Death too, and Autopsy. Like there's definitely some Autopsy vibes, albeit like a little bit more mid-tempo. Check this out, nasty EP. Hacavitz Venganza. Not entirely sure I said any of that right there. Anyway, this is the debut album from this Mexican black and death metal act, another blind buy. I saw that this band featured 2 members of Profanator, which I really like that band, or Profanator, whatever it is. Yeah, anyway, I snagged it based on that, and man, this sounds a lot like Angel Corpse. Very riffy, very blasty, very aggressive. The opening track, Night Winds, when it eventually gets going, because the first half of that song is a long intro, and it sounds like they took a lot of inspiration from Sepultura, namely Altered State, because it has that sort of like tribal drum thing, and the atmosphere, and whistles, and screams in the background. They may have added that for effect. It's not separate from the track, which is, I don't know, kind of problematic. If you're going to have an intro, at least separate it. But as soon as the song takes off, it is just ridiculously fast. And again, the Angel Corpse comparisons are right there with that just fast, aggressive, intricate riff work. The vocals are maniacal as hell. You have a lot of like shrieks and almost, I don't know, like it sounds like the dude's like laughing while screaming. It definitely makes this sound more unsettling. Alternates to low growls every now and then, which I guess this being their debut, they kind of switched up sounds later. Like this became more of a black metal centric band later on. This still definitely has a lot of death metal on it though. Huge death metal triplet chugs on Ultimate Covenant and Lusting the Dead of Night, and that's OV of, because they're Culton True, I guess. But they do a really good job in terms of like alternating back and forth between like more cold, icy riffs to just flat out brutal chugging. Old Rancor in particular, which I don't know if that's a reference to the Rancor in Star Wars, but if it is, that's pretty damn cool. And the riff work is surprisingly very technical too. Like there's a lot of crazy riff changes and cool accents they put on here. Like nothing on here I would say is like very meat and potatoes. I do think they take too many atmospheric pauses. Like it just seems like there's too many times where the music drops out for the sake of something spooky or something tied to like maybe some of the more tribal atmosphere they try to inject in here. It's cool when it happens, but I think it happens too often. And while this album definitely has a blistering pace, they are wise to slow it down at points, kind of let the atmosphere build, like not everything is an explosion. Like track 8, I can't pronounce that. We'll just say track 8. It's a good acoustic build to it. It lets the ominous atmosphere build up before taking off into just some flat out savage riffs. It's more chuggy, more brooding. I do think it kind of has a long outro on it. But overall, I really enjoyed this. I mean, I enjoy Angel Corpse, I enjoy Perdition Temple, I went over another Gene Palabicki band not too long ago in another collection update, Apocalypse Command, and I like that one for the most part, and this kind of fits right in with that sound. So yeah, pretty much if you're a fan of Gene Palabicki, like if you're a big fan of like the riffs he writes and the sort of like aggressive, technical, very evil sounding death metal / black and death metal he does, check this out. Again, I think their later stuff is more black metal than anything else, but this is definitely more black and death metal for sure, so yeah, check it out. Heads for the Dead, The Serpent's Curse. This is the debut album from this international death metal act. We went over the last album, The Grand Conjuration. I thought it was just a solid slab of, I would say, you know, style-wise, it's very rooted in Swedish death metal, like namely the Stockholm sound. A little bit of melody in there, so it's kind of between Stockholm and Gothenburg. But this debut is a little bit different. And this started off as essentially a two-man project in the studio. This is Johnny Peterson, who's known for his work in Wombeth, as well as a number of other bands, and vocalist Ralph Halber of Revel in Flesh, which is straight up HM2 death metal. I mean, the name should give it away that they worship Entombed. And that's kind of what I expected on here, like some straight up HM2 death metal. I rarely ever have a problem with that. But this is way grittier, darker, more sinister. Like the whole vibe of this is just very dark, almost like oppressively gothic. Like the guitars just sound dirtier. It's not like a flat out HM2 tone, but it is very heavy. There's, you know, atmospheric synths everywhere. And this gets like flat out like Death Doom slow, like Deep Below. That song is slow and miserable and brooding. The riffs are heavy and droning. It feels like the whole atmosphere of the song is kind of swallowing you up. And I gotta give credit to the production here. The production does not sound like their other albums where it's a little bit more compressed and just kind of like tightened up. Everything on here is, you know, much grittier, much more cavernous sounding. Like this sounds way more ominous than any of their other albums. And, you know, they definitely have their darker, heavier tracks. I mean, it's a death metal band, they should. But the vibe on here is just notably different. You still have your fast, like D-beat rippers, like the title track, Post-Mortem Suffering, The Return to Fathomless Darkness. But even with those like more punky riffs that kind of get squeezed in there, it still just has this very ominous aura to the entire album. And I dig that. Like honestly, this one kind of stands out from everything else I've listened to by the band. And now I kind of wonder why they changed up their sound. Like granted, their sound is still very heavy, very riff driven. It definitely has like a lot of those Stockholm traits, but there's something going on this one that I think is just a little bit different. And I like that just absolutely dark, suffocating atmosphere in here. Yeah, if you're a big fan of, I mean, I'll say like HM2 death metal, but also like Death Doom, like, you know, like early Paradise Lost, early My Dying Bride, like As the Flower Withers, there's definitely some stuff in there that I think is a bit comparable to that. Check this out. This is a really nasty debut. Hegemony. I'm not entirely sure how to say that word because I don't use it very often. Enthroned by Persecution. This is the debut album from this Alabama blackened death metal act / crust / war metal, maybe? I don't know. War metal's still kind of like an indistinct thing. Like, I guess I'll probably know when I hear it, but I might be hearing it with this and not knowing it. I don't know. I do know that this band features members of Seraphic Entombment, which is a band that we went over before in here. And I do know that this band has some very war metal-like stage names, which I'm going to read off because there's no way in hell I was going to remember these. So, on bass, we have Fiendish Regressor of Spiritual Obliteration and Primordial Dominator. On drums, we have Sadistic Berserker of Maniacal Destruction and Ruination Wielder. On guitars, we have Barbaric Progenitor of Hedonistic Devastation and Chaos Overlord. They're all, like, multi-titled people. Like, they got a lot of responsibilities, I think. And on vocals, we have Desolate Oppressor of Structural Annihilation and Fanatical Death Titan. Those are all a mouthful. And honestly, I feel like the names might be a little bit more creative than the music. But like that's not necessarily a bad thing because this is just super dense, super raw, super heavy, I guess war metal, black and death metal crust. It's a blend of all those things. It's just dense, thick, blackened sound that comes out of your speakers and punches you in the face and then tells you its elaborate stage name and how much it doesn't like anything. It's very minimalist, like the opening track in here, Exalted March to Decimation, very like later Celtic Frost opening riff, like it sounds like it could have been pulled off of Monotheist, but it goes kind of full bore into blasts, lots of deep guttural vocals, occasional screams, it's very cavernous sounding. Honestly, when it comes down to like the riffs, the beats, the whole presence of this, it kind of reminds me a lot of Profanatica. It's all about the darkness. It's all about just being sonically heavy and sounding evil as shit. And mission accomplished. This is just a suffocating listen. My thing is the songs really don't stand out. Like a lot of them have the same repeated tropes. Like you have galloping blasts, some faster blasts, and then some groovy sections and, you know, D beats. And then, you know, it's kind of on to the next one. The riffs, while they are extraordinarily heavy and the guitar tone is just monstrous sounding, they don't really stand out very well. I will credit this for being just a constant battering though, and I kind of appreciate it on that level where it's just relentlessly heavy, relentlessly dark. But when it came down time for me to like write down some notes that are a little bit more detailed, I honestly couldn't because I couldn't pick apart a lot of moments on here that really stood out. Honestly, probably the opening track because there is kind of a build to it, but outside of that, like a lot of these songs just take off and just beat you over the head. Like this whole album is very primal. Like this is cavemen in corpse paint here. I'm reasonably sure that's not their stage getup with elaborate names like that. It probably shouldn't be. It should be like Orc the Stone Thrower or Blurg the Tooth Vomiter. I don't know, whatever. That would be actually kind of cool now that I think about it, like cavemen in corpse paint. Anyway, I still really like this. It's not one, again, that I would pick for like certain tracks, but I would put this album on and listen to it all the way through again just because it's just unbelievably heavy. So yeah, if you like bands like Profanatica, there's a lot of like just like raw, minimalist, black and death metal that I'm thinking of that I just can't pull a name. Like I can see album covers and the logos just, it's there, but I can't make it out. Either way, check it out. Pretty nasty stuff. The Hidden Hand, Divine Propaganda. This is the debut album from this Maryland-based stoner metal act, stoner rock, stoner doom. It's a wino band. That's pretty much all I need to say, and I'm reasonably sure anyone that knows Wino's work, like, yeah, no, I already know what that sounds like, and I haven't heard a note of it. Now, this is a project that I believe he formed in between periods of inactivity with Spiritual Beggars. That band was kind of on again, off again, and he did a run of, I believe, 3 albums with this band, and I've been meaning to get some for a while, mainly because I like Wino. I have a lot of Wino projects in my collection, and this is just some gloriously stony, riffy, just awesomeness. Like, this came out on Meteor City, and Meteor City is all about that Caius worship, and while I would say, like, this, I mean, it's not, like, obsessed, like, it doesn't have, like, as much doom to it. It definitely has, like, that sort of heft in terms of the guitar tone that you expect from Wino. Like, these riffs absolutely sing because this guitar tone on here is so damn good. Now, sadly, there are not any tracks listed on the back, and I probably should have wrote them down, but I love the entire album, I can say that much. There's a lot of like bluesy sections, so they kind of slow things down, you know, let the atmosphere breathe, get some cleaner guitar tones in there. There's even some like desert punk moments where they pick it up to like D beats and almost get a little bit thrashy. And Wino is the only one doing vocals on here. I believe the bassist is chiming in with like some harsher vocals every now and then, but they feel like they're kind of like in the background occasionally, and they give it like a little bit of a hardcore punch. But yeah, across the board, like, this is one of those things where, again, I said it was a Wino project. A lot of people know what Wino projects sound like. They're generally very riff-oriented, very classic rock, stoner metal, stoner rock, that kind of vibe. And yeah, this album absolutely nails it, and I need to get like the other 2. And since this was such a short-lived band, who knows, this might be like a retro review in the future just because I want to listen to more of their stuff. But yeah, if you've never jammed Hidden Hand before, recommend this. This is just solid stoner rock, stoner metal, like a weird trip to the desert, except he's from Maryland. But yeah, check it out. Impaled, The Dead Shall Dead Remain. This is the debut album from this California-based death grind, gore grind. I don't know. I've been looking for a copy of this original forever. I believe this is original. It came out in 2000 on Death Vomit Records, and I decided to keep the little cover on this because, well, I'm still going to show you art like right over here. But the fact that it says explicit cover art banned in 42 countries, I just thought that was kind of fun. Anyway, I am a longtime fan of this band, and I have the re-recording of this, which is The Dead Still Dead Remain, I believe. And I like that re-recording. It's nice. It's a little bit more polished, but I've been looking for an original version of this album for years just because I want the original grit, gore, and grime that this original production had, and I love this thing. One of my favorite pickups down in Florida was this one. This captures everything that I want that isn't quite on the re-recording. Like, that is definitely a little bit more polished. Like, it's still gritty and gnarly sounding, but this just sounds absolutely rotten, but in like the best way. The guitars have way more of a sizzly snarl to them. I think the songs just have like a different sort of vibe to them with all this just original grit still on them. Tons of death metal tremolos, blast beats who have alternating vocals between Sean McGrath and Ross Sewage. Ross Sewage, I still think, has some of the best guttural vocals in the business. That dude just knows how to make a barf and gurgle sound somehow catchy. The songs are all explosive as hell, but they still manage to make them like catchy. Like, there's some good melodic hooks that pop up in the tremolos, and, you know, just like some earworms that pop up, because, I mean, I'm sure this album's all about giving you earworms or just worms in general. Like, trochore or flesh and blood or gornography. I love the play on words there. Fecal rites, which actually features a giant fart at the end, and me being me, I giggled my ass off. But that isn't the only bit of atmosphere they called me. The sample on Back to the Grave is the same sample that's on White Zombies, Welcome to Planet Motherfucker / Psychoholic Slag, where you're that little sample of do you have to open graves to find girls to fall in love with. And it's just as effective, and I was just more giddy that I actually recognized it. The only bit of atmosphere that I didn't like was the last track. Well, not Bloodbath, that's like the actual last track, which is really catchy and honestly probably like the most melodic song on the album, I think. It's got a little bit of melodeath to it. But the hidden 12th track on here is just a long outro of a heartbeat, and it goes on for like 20 minutes. That's the only thing I didn't like about this. I don't know if that's actually on the re-recording. I haven't gone back to that re-recording in a while. But yeah, that's the only thing I was just like, very skippable. But outside of that, this album is flat out wonderful. I love puns, I love gore, I love blast beats, I love Impaled. I love the fact that their name is actually an acronym too, and I keep forgetting, was it Immoral Medical Practitioners and Lascivious Evildoers? I think that's right. Either way, glad I found this. Still bummed I missed them at MDF 2022 because they were at the soundstage and I was off the Edison lot. But either way, if you have not checked out this debut, absolutely jam this one. And if you can find a copy of this, which this is, I guess, like reasonably rare, find it, pick it up. And while I do like the re-recording, this is pretty much the way to listen to it in my opinion. But yeah, if you're a big fan of Exhumed and stuff like that, you absolutely need to check this out. Impaled Nazarene, All That You Fear. This is the 8th album from this Finnish black metal, I mean almost like blackened thrash act. Pretty much legends in Finnish black metal, I would say. I only have one of their earlier albums, Toll Corpt Nors. I think that's what it says. I don't even know what that means, but you know, there's also stuff in here that's in Finnish that I'm just not going to be able to pronounce. I know, par for the course of this channel. But I was stoked to find some more Impaled Nazarene, and I heard a lot of good things about this album, and I love it. This is absolutely awesome. As always, I am a sucker for riffy black metal. Like, if black metal adopts like a little bit of thrash and speed metal to it, and just gives me riffs, like, outside of just like tremolos and blasts and, you know, demonic screaming, that becomes what like just draws me in to a black metal album. And this album is loaded with thrashy bangers, like some Celtic Frost worship, but also lots of good like atmospheric droning tremolos. It sounds evil and sinister, but it also sounds like, I don't know, maybe it kind of wants to party a little bit. Songs like Armageddon Death, The Endless War, Suffer in Silence, there's a lot of like classic heavy metal harmonies on there. They're just hooky and, you know, very old school, but they still give it that black metal snarl to it. Like, you know, there's like a fair amount of like Dark Throne, like riffy sleaze to these songs. But again, it changes gears frequently. Like, you get the songs like The Maggot Crusher or the opening track, which, nope, there's no way in hell I could actually pronounce that correctly. I'm not even going to try on that one. Or Halo of Flies. Those songs are decidedly more like just straight up black metal. Blast beats, heavy tremolos. They sound evil as shit, and I just like this constant flip-flop because you get some songs in here that are just about like thrashy gallops and just mean-spirited chugging. And then you get to the next track and it's all like, you know, blackened angel witch and shit like that. That frequent shift from like evil to anthemic to sleazy to just violent, I really like that. That made this album a real like adventure to listen to because all the tracks were paced really well to the point where they kept changing up and they kind of kept you on your toes. Even the title track is a little bit different. It's more slow and menacing. There's a creepy vocal filter on there. It sounds kind of staticky. But yeah, I love this. This was absolutely awesome. And yeah, I definitely need some more Impaled Nazarene in my collection because everything I've heard from them, there's always been like an element of like some good thrashy riffs to them. And I love that. Like, it kind of gives their style of black metal, like, you know, just a fun, rowdy, fucking just mean as shit energy, and I dig it. Like, this doesn't feel like it wants to just hide in the darkness and just, the sun. This sounds like it wants to rage no matter what time of day it is. The energy stays primed on this album. This was a super fun listen. If you're a big fan of I mean, like, there's some stuff that reminds me of Dark Throne. Armageddon, I would say, is kind of close to this. Even, like, you know, more straightforward, like, thrash metal bands or black and thrash. Like, I definitely hear a lot of Sodom on here. Maybe some stuff that's comparable to Skeleton Witch, too. Check this out. This album's absolutely awesome, and I'm definitely going to get more Impaled Nazarene in my collection for damn sure. Imposer, Divine Intolerance EP. This is the second EP from this Italian death metal act. Another blind buy. I saw it for, again, reasonable price. I think it was like $3-4 or something like that. Saw it on Severed Records, and it was flat out death metal. It's from Italy. Those are things that generally get me interested, and this is pretty solid. Straight up kind of like old school death metal, very like apocalyptic, cavernous, muddy sound to it. The title track in particular has this cool little shift between like these just lumbering, heavy triplet chugs and these more dissonant melodies, and they kind of like do a give and take thing with them that I really like. Some nasty grooves on there, some solid blast beats. The vocals kind of remind me a lot of Christian, and kind of the pace in terms of like the faster sections. Like it has that just like flat out aggressive blast that Christian is known for. And this has a couple of covers on here. The big one that I was stoked to hear was the cover of Sacrificial Suicide, originally done by Deicide. They nail it. It's actually crushing. It was interesting to hear with like their guitar tone because it's more of like an incantation style tone. It doesn't have that thrashy crunch that, you know, Deicide has, but they did a solid job on that. And another one is by a band called Heathen Life Code, which is apparently an Italian crust punk band or something like that. I don't know. I had some questions because when I looked them up in the archives, one of their themes was supremacy, and, you know, that's kind of like a buzzword there. I'm, you know, not entirely sure what they're being supreme about. It's very vague. It doesn't sound like it has any like racist stuff on it. I just wanted to check and be sure because that ain't me. But as far as I can tell, it's just sort of a vague supremacy, like their style of death metal is supreme over other styles of death metal. I don't know. I'm kind of hoping that's what it's about. The archives are a little bit vague when it comes down to listing bands that have those particular themes on there. So who knows, but I don't think that's the case. Now, this band ended up breaking up in 2014. I think there's one or two other EPs and one full length by this band. And I do want to check out more by them because I really like their style, and it's kind of like a halfway between like the Italian brutal death metal that I've definitely gotten very accustomed to, and well, like just like kind of like flat out old school death metal. So yeah, if you like, I would say like Incantation, Morbid Angel, Christian is also a good comparison too. Check this one out. Pretty solid EP. And finally we have Infestus, Origin. This is a compilation of this Spanish death metal acts, I would say like pretty much their entire works. This band ran from 1990 to 1996. There was a reunion at some point, I would say like the 2010s, but they ended up breaking up once again. And this is pretty much a collection of everything they did. Now this includes their 90s demos, namely the first one, Unnatural Legacy, which came out in 93, and Atmosphera Asphyxia, which was an unreleased demo that they did in 1994. And then their Origin demo, which, well, was unreleased, but was done in 2015. And this is really cool because you get like a good chronological, you know, sort of view on this band in terms of how they progressed from album to album, or in this case, from demo to demo. Now, the Unnatural Legacy demo, which actually, no, that's all in English. Oh my God, that's so awesome, because the rest of them aren't. I mean, I got to see it in Spanish in high school, but I don't think that really means shit now. But that one is definitely the more raw of the three demos. It's very incantation-ish, like just very swampy and muddy, big doomy riffs, cavernous vocals, some real primal heaviness that kind of reminds me of Baphomet in spots. The songwriting I don't think is quite there yet. Like, you know, the transitions can be a little rough. Like there's a weird off-time hitch on Theater of Cruelty that, I don't know, like it doesn't feel like it lands completely, but overall, like it sounds good. It sounds like they had like the start of like something really good that unfortunately didn't lead to like a full length. Now the second demo, Atmosfera de Asphyxia, which these are definitely all in Spanish, way different sound overall. The guitars are more crisp, there's a more defined crunch to them. It's just kind of cleared of a lot of mud. The vocals now sit like kind of in a more mid-range overall. I want to say like it has like a thrashier vibe to it, but it's still very much old school death metal. And it's definitely become like a little bit more technical. Like the song Madura Muerta, but I know Muerta's like death. So I don't know what the first one is. That doesn't matter anyway. Way more technical riffs on there, like way more intricate crawling, you know, harmonies and such. Like you can definitely tell they were pushing themselves in terms of like, you know, getting a little bit more creative with the riff structure. I gotta say the snare though on this demo is just obscenely loud. Like someone beating a dumpster with an aluminum bat. Like it's just way too noisy. But overall, like musically, you could definitely hear an improvement. And then this band would break up and then reform somewhere in the 2010s, I want to say like 2012. And then they would do their 2015 Origin demo, and that is legit the best material on this entire collection. They definitely improved as musicians. The songwriting is way tighter, way more intricate. There's more like thrashy riffs mixed in. It's decidedly more technical, bordering on progressive at times. Honestly, I would have loved to have heard this stuff on like a full-on album. The only thing I didn't like about this portion of the comp was the fact that they put in a lot of interludes. And you know, they're cool to break up the songs, I guess, but I feel like they hung out too long, and then there was just, again, like too many of them. But musically, I think that's the best material on this entire comp, and it sucks that they end up breaking up, I want to say, like either that year or like 2016, like the year after. But yeah, this was another blind buy, a random pickup. I mean, I saw it was on Extreme Music, and they're generally pretty good about reissuing like more obscure albums. Sometimes they're not as great about remastering them, but this still sounds pretty solid. I mean, considering that they are like 90s death metal demos, and one 2015 one, which honestly that one sounds just fine. I imagine they didn't have to do anything to that one. But yeah, I dig it. I had no idea about this band. I'm still kind of getting into more of like Spain's death metal scene, which they got like a fair amount of killer bands there. But yeah, if you see this floating around and you like stuff like, you know, Incantation, but also like Monstrosity, especially that last demo. That last demo reminded me a lot of Monstrosity. Check this out. It's really good. And that will knock out yet another one of these. I already have the next one kind of lined up, and I'm already working on the one after that. And lots of stuff being worked on here because, yeah, we're perpetually busy. I've even got a stack of CDs outside of stuff that I got from Florida because they keep accumulating. Or rather, I just keep buying them because I just keep buying them. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats too, so if you're looking for any of that, click the link down below. And of course, thank you very much for liking, subscribing, sharing, all that stuff. We got a lot of stuff planned for you. We've noticed that the discussion forums have been taking off a bit, so we definitely want to do some more. So we're kind of rooting around for subjects to kind of ramble on about because they've been a lot of fun here lately. And of course, collection updates, states of metal, reviews, all the usual stuff because this is what we do and we love doing this kind of shit for you because it's just an absolute blast. You guys make this channel so much fun to do, and we are forever in your debt. So one more big thank you because you guys earn it every time, and we will catch you later.